Hi, everyone. This is Lauren Baker, and welcome to today's episode of the SEJ Show. With me, I have Ben Steele, our senior editor of ebooks. Hey, Ben, how's it going?
Pretty good. Having a good day. How about you?
Having a great day so far. So, where are you based, by the way?
Idaho.
Idaho. Okay, so you're still in the morning time as well.
Yeah.
So, Ben, you're more than just a senior editor of ebooks. You've been working on so many special projects here at SEJ over the years, including the 4-Hour Workweek project, all of our major studies and things like that. And then we're just about to release the new 2023 edition of the State of SEO. Could you be kind enough to tell our audience a little bit about our State of SEO report, how it's put together, and then we can get into some of the changes and some of the highlights that we've seen from this year compared to the last few years?
Yeah, sure. When I came on board, we were doing we started last year's State of SEO report pretty soon after I came on board, so it was a bit of a whirlwind. I was still getting used to how things worked and the job and everything, and we had this massive report that to work on. So it was definitely a bit of an overwhelming experience the first time. This time I'm
So we just threw everything at you as soon as you started, then, right?
Yeah, pretty much. This time, I had the whole year to do the run up, and so I'm really excited about this one because I feel as though I was more involved from the start of the process, which helps me really understand everything about the report better. But so the State of SEO report, to actually answer your question, is we do an annual survey of our audience, and we ask them a bunch of questions related to SEO, digital marketing, and their jobs, the industry, and things like that. And I think this year we had 3,890 responses, which is a pretty good amount. And so then from that survey data, we develop we take all the insights that we get from the surveys. We have Angie, who's our social media manager, goes through it with Python and does all the data crunching stuff that I don't understand. And then we come up with data to play with, and that's where I come in, and we start going through the data and trying to work out what the insights are and what's important, and what kinds of things are helpful to include to help people in the industry plan their next year in SEO.
So, and how regionalized is that group?
So our audience is global, and so a lot of the responses are global, but I will say that we had this year about a 50% United States region response rate. So any data that we have has a pretty clear US bias, though we do have a lot of responses from, for example, India as well, and a bunch of other areas of the world: England, Australia, Pakistan, lots and lots of places.
So I see that we were able to highlight some of the call outs from the report this year, and one of the ones that sticks out to me. When did we run this survey again?
Oh, it was, or I think this was in Q2.
Okay, in Q2. So the top 3 disruptors in SEO performance are expected from number 1, generative AI, number 2, EAT and trusted sources, and then number 3, automation tools. So even we saw that early on this year, generative AI really was noted as a top expected disruptor.
Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, has it really affected search yet this year?
That's a real interesting one, because we have a slight discrepancy in some of the responses. For example, people noted that generative AI would be the biggest disruptor, but respondents are also by and large positive. They feel pretty positively about generative AI's impact and its effects, and potential it has to impact the bottom line of their business. And I think that there's some interesting duality to note there. It's disrupting a lot of things, but people are really excited about it still. And
Yeah.
so I think that we're still in a phase where we're not quite sure. The dust is still settling, let me say. Google is experimenting with search generative experience. That has not been rolled out. It's still in experimental phase as far as I'm aware. And I know that a lot of people are quite concerned about that. You have big industry names who are saying things like, the next era of search is going to be more about brand recognition than it is about acquiring clicks from SERPs, because you're going to want to have your brand in the generative AI responses and things like that. I think Rand said that pretty recently. And then you have, the usual doom and gloom crowd who's saying SEO is dead because generative AI is going to replace search engines. I don't think that's true, but so yeah, I don't know. I see a lot of adoption right now. I see a lot of folks rushing to experiment with the ways that generative AI can benefit them.
Right.
I think that we have yet to see any true disruption shake out. I think that I think that Google was quick on the uptake as far as experimentation goes, but it may take a long time before language models are advanced enough for them to be happy to roll it out.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the conversational journey that ChatGPT introduced into the world of AI is something that's a long-term want of the user at the end of the day. Does the user want to have a conversation? Does the user want to have a machine plan their entire vacation or whatever?
I think that we've already seen something like this play out, right, with voice search, with the kind of the conversational nature of voice search. And in the end, voice search has been around for a while. Home voice devices have been around for a few years now, and I look at search and I'm thinking to myself, did it really change things that much? Did voice search really shift user behavior that much? And from my point of view, I don't think so. Maybe generative AI will be different, but I think that we've already seen a new technology drop and some kind of not resistance, I would call it. I would say momentum.
Yeah.
Research, the way that people interact with the internet, has a ton of momentum behind it, and it's going to take a lot to kind of break those habits.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because most voice searches are things like, "What is the temperature outside?"
Right.
Or "What time is it?" And then like when you take your voice searches away from your in-home device and it's more so like your remote control, then it's actually probably learning more about you then, right? Because then it's
Right.
like, stream peripheral on Amazon, or do this or do that, and then there's that connection between a transactional thing where like everything else with the home products was just like, how's the weather?
Yeah.
So it's just small talk. Cool. And what else really stuck out to you in this report? I think there was some really interesting information about freelancers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we started with our report with a little bit of information about the industry as a whole. We thought that it seemed to help to include a little bit of kind of career focused information right off the bat. We have focused on three kind of core areas, which we can get into next. But your note about freelancers is we're honing in on, and I would say that these insights require a little bit of interpretation on our part. It's kind of like putting the pieces of the data together, which is that there's a lot of competition right now out there for junior roles. in SEO, and that what a lot of companies are looking for are advanced skill sets, which is creating some like a good deal of competition for kind of the more junior positions. And one of the things that we've seen to kind of support that is the level of experience of respondents. A lot of respondents have less than 5 years of experience, and those respondents are most concerned about competition. And then we've also seen that a majority of our freelancer respondents, I think 69% of them, said that they're actually looking to move from freelancing to a permanent position in the next year.
Why do you think that is?
I think that a lot of it is having to do with inflation.
Yeah.
And I think that freelancing is one of the areas that we're going to see generative AI disrupt fastest and first. Because so it's kind of this combination of, inflation is impacting consumers, which is impacting business sales, which is impacting the services that those businesses need, right? And so we're seeing this kind of a knock-on effect down the whole business service line because of due to the effects of inflation, let alone cost of materials and things like that. And so, a lot of companies are looking for ways to tighten their belts a little bit, we think. And then, so that's kind of impacting a lot of budgets I think that freelancers are probably at the greatest risk of getting cut from a budget versus an agency or something like that.
That's really interesting to me because I get that. Like, I'm a freelancer a lot of the time. I totally get it. This has been a tough year. Yet at the same time, when we put out this report, there were 160,000 layoffs from tech companies and startups that happened.
Yeah.
No, there were 200 something thousand. That's Amazon, Google, Salesforce, Dell, SAP, et cetera, more from Amazon, Meta, obviously, TikTok, a little bit from Twitter. They're the ones that kind of sparked the kindling, so to speak.
Right.
And everyone else followed suit. It's like, hey, blame Twitter first and then do the same exact thing.
Right.
That's really interesting because it looks like I'm looking at a site right now called trueup.io layoffs, and it looks like it's really slowed down in the past couple of months, but at the same time, it's just kind of interesting to me because it's just like one of those things where like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Like, oh, do I stay a freelancer and possibly get cut with budgets, or do I go inside somewhere and then the next thing I know, I'm in the newspaper for being laid off?
Right. And it's tough because it works both ways. I bet a bunch of companies that are laying off staff are also turning to freelancers. So there could be more workaround for the freelancers that are looking hard for it. But I think that in an environment where it seems like budgets are so unstable, it seems like any work you might find as a freelancer could be short-lived.
Yeah. And to your point with AI, right? Because especially if you're there's a lot of gray area between an SEO freelancer and a content freelancer. And I think the AI drive for utilizing it for content or content outlines has really scared a lot of content freelancers.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's where a lot of the anxiety lies. I know that we're already starting to see the effects of visual learning models that produce art on artist freelancers, right?
Yes.
It's super easy for a company to just replace a freelancer with an art learning model. We've already seen like high profile cases, like Wizards of the Coast was doing it. A bunch of other companies were doing it, and they caught some backlash for that. when
Yeah, they were doing it
call
in
signs.
like the latest D&D books, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, though I think that may have been one of their artists versus a like a company policy, but
Mm.
so that there is the kind of the other side of that, which is there are some artists who are using it to work faster. Um,
Right.
and I think the same is true for language models in terms of content. I think that it might be a little slower because I think that it's my opinion that it's harder for the language for generative AI as it is now to parse text than it is visual language. That seems to be something that's true to me. Is that it's a lot easier to get something you need out of a visual model than it is out of a text model right now. And so I think it's taking a little longer, but yeah, I think that we see a lot of anxiety, especially among freelancers, especially among content freelancers, about what happens when I just when a company just decides that they would be better off using a language model and having someone edit it internally. And I've also seen a lot of conversation about out there about how the content writer may become more of a content editor role.
Yeah.
Like if you're a writer now, you'd better start brushing up on your editing chops.
What about the what about the metrics that I noticed one point on here that was the SEO professionals prioritize metrics that can build an understanding of how users interact with the SERPs.
Mhm.
What were the top 3 metrics, and did you see any changes between this and the previous year?
Yeah, so we're getting into kind of the core of the report now, which is we identified these 3 kind of core disruptors, AI, of course, being one of them, is the biggest disruptor people noticed. But the other ones we looked at are content and content strategy as a kind of an industry disruptor, and that's because we see at the same time with disruption coming to content from AI, disruption is also coming to content from Google's side because they're shoring up their definitions and expanding their examinations of content, adding the expertise to EEAT and making updates to helpful content and deprioritizing some of the more technical ranking factors. And then the next one is, like you mentioned, metrics and performance. And this is something that we noticed last year too, that one of the biggest struggles that SEO professionals have in this industry is tracking and then communicating their performance and the effectiveness of the work they do. And
Mm.
this is true no matter what type of company or business you work in, but for different reasons. So, for example, an agency SEO will encounter issues with client retention when it comes to communicating the impact of their work, whereas an in-house SEO it's more of like an internal budget conversation of like justify the work you're doing to executives. But both of these are communication issues. The main difference is that in-house SEOs don't have a sales team working to keep people on board. So that's one of the things that we noticed, and we actually didn't do a direct comparison when it comes to metrics from this year to last year. And the reason is we actually changed the answers of the question. And so
Mm.
there were some interesting things that we noted, but as we were looking at the direct year-over-year comparisons, we realized that having removed, I think, 1 metric and added, I think, like 3, really muddies the water, and it wouldn't have been a true comparison. So we're starting a little bit from scratch when it comes to metrics. What we found this year is that the top metric that overall people were tracking was actually click-through rate.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, then we have branded versus non-branded traffic. And then third, we had keyword rankings. Fourth, we have leads, so qualified leads. And then all the way down in fifth, we have organic page views. And this
Why do you
is
think click-through rate came through at number one?
so what we sort of assume here, and we did a little bit of comparison with last year, is there's no direct comparison, like I said, but it seems that people are pulling away from these sort of they're sometimes called vanity metrics, right? Of raw rankings, raw traffic data. And we saw, for example, in when we asked our agency and freelance friends what the biggest cause of client turnover is, their response was the dissatisfaction with the quality of the traffic they're getting. And so what we're kind of seeing is that, last year we noted that the people were going back to basics and focusing on kind of technical SEO. And this year we're seeing audience understanding, intent, and traffic quality come up a lot in terms of not just, what are your raw numbers, but what does this traffic mean? Who are these people, and how do they relate to your brand? That makes sense from a point of view of some of the disruptions we've seen on SERPs themselves. So we've seen a lot of buzz about zero-click searches, right? And then Google drops search generative experience, and people are saying, well, that's, there's no credit going to any of the websites that provide the information for that. So what is that going to do? And so I think that for some of those reasons, click-through rate is really top of mind for a lot of people right now. And then we have things like this sort of branded traffic tracking and what generates leads, and so we're seeing that it seems to us, at least, that SEOs are focused on finding ways to measure impact on business goals,
Yes.
rather than just number goes up, right?
That makes complete sense.
And we did break this down by earners. So we took a look at what the highest earners of our report said that they tracked. And we made the note that, it's not necessarily that the higher earners are doing it better or more correctly. It's that they're probably responsible for different goals, because the more money you make, the more likely you are to be responsible for business revenue goals.
Yes.
But so their top metrics were, the branded versus non-branded traffic and qualified leads were their top. And then they stuck with as well click-through rate and organic page views. So, even though those folks are, their top answers are pretty much the same with the crowd, but they prioritize the branded traffic and leads, whereas the lower earners seem to be the ones who prioritize click-through rate.
Interesting. So really focusing on business case at the end of the day, what happens after not just getting the ranking or getting the traffic, but the quality of the traffic actually converting,
The whole journey.
what they're looking for, the entire thing, which is actually refreshing, because it's an SEO's job is not just to drive traffic and not just to drive traffic. An SEO's job is to complete that journey all the way down to the checkout.
Right.
And it's handed over to someone else. But yeah, so whatever, especially in ecom, whatever's on the PDP, what's shown above the fold, how it's being indexed, what can be found there, how that's tracked, how that's synced up with Merchant Center, how that's synced up, is the shipping getting out on time? Like the fact that Merchant Center reports now on how long it takes an item to ship, and that is a ranking factor within Google Shopping, is pretty amazing. So all of that back end stuff. And then, your Merchant Center product listings are synced with Search Console, blah, blah, blah. So just it's all connected at the end of the day. And just hearing that more people are getting deeper into that is really gratifying to me to hear as a long-term SEO.
Yeah, we thought this was a cool and interesting result. And a lot of it, some of these more detailed values are newly added this year. And so we notice a significant drop for example, in this year versus last year, in the people who responded where total page views was their top metric. I think that was one of the top metrics last year. This year it's at the bottom. But as we were looking at that, we thought, oh, hey, how cool is that? But then we realized, well, we added like 3 new ways of categorizing page views. So it's not necessarily that, people changed their answer. It's that we gave them more detailed answers, and so we couldn't really make that direct comparison year over year. And this is one thing that we're going to be working on, and the State of SEO is kind of a continuing project of where we can really refining what our questions are, what we want to get out of them, so that we can make these more consistent and directly comparable year over year. That's kind of a goal we have for the future.
Very cool. And I also saw that SEO professionals are focused on content and content strategy this year, naming it as one of the top focuses of their work for this year. Also being one of the most effective overall SEO strategies. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we saw content as a common theme. So like you said, it's the top focus of our respondents. It's also, they named it as their most effective strategy. They also named it as the most difficult part of the jobs they do. And it's also their number 2 priority for implementing automated software. The number 1 priority for automated software was generative AI, which I feel like has overlap with content. So I think we can call it the top spot for that as well. So it's just, it's been their top answer for a lot of things. People are hyper focused on the effectiveness of their content, their strategy, and their production process for it.
Very cool. Very cool. And did we talk yet about the top barriers to success that this audience has seen in the past 12 months?
Yeah, I don't think we talked about it yet, but we asked our audience about the barriers that they see, and we had some pretty interesting results on that one. One of them was direct competition in SERPs, which we thought was pretty interesting. And we also have, I'm just looking for my data here because that is just off the top of my head. Boop, 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 boop. Here we go. Budget cuts was the actual top answer. I was wrong. Then followed by competition in SERPs. Then third was client relationship issues. And then fourth, we had rapid onset of new tech. And then after that, we had kind of like the necessity of new skills and new technologies. So what we noticed was that communication related barriers seem to be pretty prominent. Budget cuts and approvals feels like a communication related barrier to me. It's, when budgets get tighter, you have to fight a little harder for them. And then we also have third, client relationship issues. And we already know from what I said earlier that, the top reason clients leave is dissatisfaction with the quality of their traffic. And then we also have this, the competition on search engine results pages answer here, which was our number 2. And we think that a lot of this stuff is connected, right? Because as competition increases, it gets harder to have those impressive performance numbers. And at the same time, it feels like the folks controlling the money are getting a little bit more stringent with their budgets and focusing in on what really moves the needle in terms of business impact, which is why I think that we're seeing folks move to these to these metrics that are a little bit more difficult to track and qualify, but it's how your efforts are impacting the business goals. Like, what is the quality of this traffic? What are we actually delivering? Because the kind of the raw numbers may not be the surface level raw numbers may not be cutting it anymore when it comes to convincing people to give you money.
Well, at the same time too, I mean, a lot of this seems to be very communication oriented and then education oriented, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think, speaking of competition in the SERPs, I can't remember another time in this industry where there's been so many updates happening at once, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are announced updates. Like it just seems like there's a new update every weekend.
Right.
And Google's testing stuff every weekend. I love just putting my phone, my browser in incognito mode on the weekend and doing searches because that's when they seem to be working. And then like you see, like now we have the tiled results on mobile, right? And that's crept up from like page 3 to page 2, and it's starting at page 1. And it's a lot of it is really, it's not just competition in the SERPs, but it's competition with Google, because Google wants people to click on advertisements,
Right.
They don't want people to click on organic searches. They want people to click on advertisements because that's a business model. So if you can turn the organic searches into things like almost like a Pinterest board of tiles, and then have a very easy to click sponsored ad, then that totally changes the game, right? Because then you have the same positioning, but your CTR has gone incredibly down because of the way that Google's fooling around with the way the search results pages.
Right. And I mean, the more rich results there are too, like, this, I'm noticing that most of the time the first organic result isn't even on the screen when I first look at my results page. I actually have to scroll down to see the number 1 spot in Google. Like,
yes, it's gotten pretty hairy out there.
Yeah.
So we have a couple minutes left. How would you wrap this up with major conclusions and major focus that will be expected to see in the State of SEO report?
I think that one of the things that we noticed, and we try not to editorialize too much, because this is a tool for you to set your strategy for, and we try to highlight the places where the data speaks for itself rather than try and speak for the data. But we do a little bit of providing our thoughts and opinions, because that's I feel like there's probably value in that. And one of the things that we're seeing is that what SEO professionals are really focused on right now is audience building. And some of that is in what other ways can you keep in touch with audiences. We have some data about some SEOs are focusing on, like, for example, email lists, and really nailing the content targeting. Search intent is big this year. And just finding ways to really understand and to focus your efforts on the high value users who matter in terms of not just your sales, but your branding and your reputation as a business, as a thought leader, or whoever you happen to be, and whatever content you happen to be making. So that's one of the things that we see people focusing on, is when performance is disrupted, you focus on the value you can get out of what you have, rather than just trying to get that line to go up and to the right some more, right? And part of that is the kind of the content factor of improving content strategy and really looking at the general trajectory of Google. Google is experimenting with generative AI, and so is everybody else. But at the same time, they're increasing their standards for what counts as helpful content. And so that should be, whether generative AI can improve your workflows or help you do things, you have to stay focused on that general trajectory of search, which is providing, the best, most helpful answer in the most user-friendly way possible, right? And whatever the future looks like, you are more likely to be set up for success by doing that than by jumping on whatever whatever is trending currently or whatever new update comes out, because there's hundreds of them a year. So those are kind of some of the overall impacts, and then of course focusing on how you communicate. If you're on an internal team, how do you communicate your value and the value of your work up the chain, and
Right.
you're working account management for an agency. How can you integrate more into how can you provide insight? Sorry, integrate was the wrong word. To your clients into the real business effect of what you're doing, because I don't think people are convinced by the we'll get you page one for whatever you want stuff anymore, because it's like, well, page one for what? Page one for something that nobody searches for? Like,
Not looking up anything, is it?
yeah. So those are some of the general takeaways that off the top of my head I found when I was putting together the report.
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to it, Ben. Ben Steele, where can folks find you online?
Right now, your best bet is LinkedIn. That's I actually deleted my Twitter because I was sick of it. So, it's just, you can search for me on LinkedIn. Ben Steele, Steele, is my last name. And then obviously you can find me through the Search Engine Journal LinkedIn as well, but that's where you're most likely to find me. If you want to email, I check the editor at searchenginejournal.com email pretty regularly.
Oh, wow. Great. Well, Ben, it's been a pleasure. I'm happy to hear that we can find you on LinkedIn. It's become my favorite social network, so to speak, as well. And no, there's not too much drama over on LinkedIn. Like, I don't see the LinkedIn CEO to like fight somebody at another.
Yeah. Though I have noticed that ever since I deleted my Twitter, my posts on LinkedIn have been getting a little spicier, so I've got to watch that.
Yeah.
I'm bringing that Twitter energy to LinkedIn, and that might not be welcome.
No. All right. Well, it's been good. Thank you for the team. Thank you to the team at Channable for sponsoring today's episode.
Yes,
and thank you, Ben, for giving us a brief overview of everything to expect from the 2023 State of SEO report. That we're going to.
Thank you, Lauren. It's always a pleasure.
I look forward to it. Okay, thanks. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Search Engine Journal Show. If you liked this episode, subscribe to our channel for so much more and click the notification bell so you don't miss a thing.